Hello, everyone. You're listening to You Got It with Warrior Woman 91. All right. Thank you, everyone, for everyone who supported the last episode that I did with Neon Taster. It looks like it's going to be my most highly viewed episode of all time, even beating out Partis. So thank you guys so much for enjoying that podcast and leaving me all the positive feedback. And since you guys love me having the guests on the show, I've done my best to get you another guest this week. His name is Devin Sena. I should have asked him how to pronounce his last name, Sena. You can follow him at Devin Sena UI on Twitter. He's a social media coordinator at Live Action and a fierce pro-life advocate, which is why I really wanted to have him on the show. Devin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
So, as you can imagine, this is going to be another one of my pro-life episodes, since it's really become one of the only issues that I care about anymore. I really wanted to start off with, Devin, you kind of giving your kind of backstory on how you became pro-life. As my audience knows that I wasn't always pro-life, and I've kind of told that story before, but I really wanted to hear what your, whether you've always been pro-life or if you're a pro-life convert. How did that come about for you?
Sure. So I think I've always been pro-life. Back when I was a child, maybe 7 or 8, there used to be a health channel on TV, which I absolutely loved. And it had shows like Untold Stories of the ER and things like that. And there was a birthday show that would play in the mornings. I would watch like every episode of that. That was so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually wanted to be an OBGYN and help deliver babies when I was a child. But yeah, so that channel got replaced with an Oprah channel, which broke my heart into pieces.
Wow.
But fast forward, yeah, I know, right? Oprah just ruined the channel. But fast forward to my freshman year of high school, I got very involved in politics. But at some point, God placed on my heart that nothing really matters unless we first recognize the dignity of every life. And protect them with our nation's laws. Mm-hmm. And so, there were 3,000 children who were dying every single day. And all these political back and forth didn't really, it doesn't really ultimately matter when we're taking the lives of our future.
Mm-hmm. So I wasn't always pro-life, as I mentioned. I kind of fell for the whole women's right not to have to carry a baby argument, mostly because I just... as a woman, I felt like, well, I wouldn't want to have to carry a baby if I didn't want to or whatever. But it never was something that I really thought about. It was something that I would just hear bits and pieces of things, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to be forced to do something I don't want to do. I don't want to. I also felt somewhat obligated, like, as a Christian, I'm now obligated to be pro-life, and I didn't really understand what the real controversy was. I was only hearing basically the Planned Parenthood talking points, and then what ended up converting me was seeing the videos from the sting operation carried out by the Center for Medical Progress. I'm sure you're familiar with those, with the baby body parts and the petri dishes and all of that. And I was like, okay, that's a kid. So what do you think needs to be done to kind of bring about more of those kinds of, I don't know, change of minds, or at least just bring more awareness to this issue that there's a certain reality of abortion, that it is infanticide and not just women's health or women's rights issue?
Yeah, I mean, the notion that abortion forwards women's health is absolutely absurd. It's mentioned a ton, but they refuse to report on the fact that one woman is always very injured. Mm-hmm. There's high rates of suicide, high rates of depression. There's very high rates of mental illness following an abortion. So they don't report about the woman who is harmed. And what about the woman's health? What about the baby's health? A lot of times, half the time, it's a girl that's killed. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the notion that abortion forwards women's health is absolutely crazy, and it's wrong. to really raise more awareness that abortion really does kill an innocent human being, is showing the reality. And so Live Action has produced abortion procedure videos that have been narrated by a former abortionist, and he describes that every single abortion violently takes the life of an innocent human being. Mm-hmm. And so, just showing that reality, you can see that for yourself at abortionprocedures.com. But in the first trimester, a baby is either starved to death or torn apart through a suction machine. Mm-hmm. And so these are distinct human beings. And in the second trimester, a baby is either dismembered, and then their limbs are legitimately torn off their healthy bodies, like while they're still alive. And then in the third trimester, a baby is poisoned and then delivered feet first, and labor is essentially induced. At every single point, whether abortion in the first trimester or third trimester, we're killing a precious person.
Yeah.
But I think...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just showing the reality, making people aware of what actually happens in an abortion. Over 150 million people have seen these abortion procedure videos that we created. Mm-hmm. And then countless women and children have been saved from the violence of abortion.
Yeah, it's. I think that I 100% agree with you, because that really was what it took for me to become pro-life, is to actually see really the bloody reality. I think that is also what is required of a lot of people. I think that they need to see what the reality is. However, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to describe some of this stuff to children. It's amazing how Planned Parenthood has found ways to insert themselves into like elementary schools and high schools and whatever, and they're able to sell to children their agenda. But I feel like the pro-life movement, and perhaps this is just my perception, but it seems like it's harder for us to really, grassroots into the high schools and the elementary schools and really start at the bottom up. I do think it's helpful. I'm noticing celebrities in Hollywood, and I know I'm getting a little bit off in a tangent here, but I've been following the whole Shawn Johnson pregnancy thing going on YouTube, and I think that whether, I don't know if she's a Republican or a Democrat. I don't know if her husband is a Republican or a Democrat, but her videos are like accidentally the most pro-life videos I've ever seen, because they're talking about, she miscarried a baby. She is going through complications with her pregnancy, and they're talking about how 20 weeks the baby's already got fingers and toes, and they're counting them. I think that things like that are like they're the less overt ways of selling it to young people, that these are human beings. They're not just, somebody's science project necessarily. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there are certain ways that celebrities are accidentally, planting messages like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so there's tons of celebrities who aren't openly pro-life, but I would think are closet pro-lifers, right? And because the majority of Americans, they realize that is a baby in the womb. Mm-hmm. Right? Nobody is like, congratulations. Congratulations on your clump of cells.
Exactly.
Congratulations on your fetus. Like, it's not a lifeless blob of tissue. Like, everybody realizes that even at 10, 12 weeks, like, you can feel a baby kicking. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a child there. And I definitely think we should make a push. The abortion procedure videos should be in sex ed curriculum if that's being taught in public schools. And it's vital. It's vital that students, especially students who are pushed to being more sexually active, unfortunately, they don't even know what abortion is and what it entails.
Yeah, I had no idea what abortion really was. I thought, it's just a procedure. Like it's always talked about in such vague and I don't know, like couched terms. Like, yeah, exactly. We never talk about what it really is. And then I found out quickly as I started to be converted on this issue, when I started to talk about what abortion really entailed. Everybody around me got very uncomfortable, and my fellow pro-choice or people were just like, why are you talking about that? Why are you talking about that? And I'm like, well, why shouldn't I talk about this? This is reality. But people don't want to hear that, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of people call themselves pro-choice. I mean, if you asked a 5-year-old, are you pro-choice? They'd be like, yeah, I'm pro-choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a lot of choices in life. You know, what I want to have, what we want to have for dinner tonight to eat, like who we want to marry, like who we want to, or where we want to go to school. We have a lot of choices, but nobody should have the ability to choose to kill an innocent human being. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about here. When we get rid of all the euphemisms, the reality is abortion is brutal.
Yeah, it's just really unfortunate that we can't actually talk about it in those terms for some reason in real life. So I specifically wanted to talk to a guy about this issue because I feel like we hear a lot from women on abortion, but some of the best testimonies on this issue have actually come from men that I've heard. There was one gentleman that told me a story. He's probably in his mid-60s, and he told me that he had paid when he was a teenager, or like 18 years old or something. He had paid his girlfriend to have an abortion, and he says he's 65, 68. I don't know how old he is, but he says he still is having nightmares about it to this day. So I really would like to hear from more men on this issue, just because it does impact them. So I guess my questions for you really involve, I've got a lot of friends who are guys who are kind of pro-choice, but more like pro-choice in name only because they're afraid that girls won't like them or something if they say otherwise. And so I guess I would like for you to speak to kind of that mentality of, like, what would you say to a guy that needs like a push to actually be more overtly or publicly pro-life?
Sure. Yeah, I would say to be pro-life is to be pro-woman, right? And so I would say it's more attractive to be pro-life, to say that a lot of times men are told that they have no say in this, but we are affected as well. Mm-hmm. And the culture says we have no say, but live action investigators have caught Planned Parenthood willing to aid human traffickers. They're getting away with the rape of young girls. And women and girls are also targeted by the abortion industry. In the greatest moments of desperation, when they feel like they have no other option, Planned Parenthood doesn't see a woman there to help. They see a dollar sign. Mm-hmm. And they often pressure, coerce them into abortions. And ultimately, 3,000 innocent children are killed every day in America. These things alone should ignite every person, especially men, to speak out against it. And I believe that men have a God-given duty to defend women. This is both born and pre-born. And so I think it's absolutely vital that we speak out, regardless of gender, but especially men who are called to defend and stand by women.
Yeah, I honestly find it kind of cowardly that more men aren't actually speaking up on this issue. I know I'm not trying to discount there are quite a few men that do, but it does feel like, especially the way the left has framed this argument as it's a women's right issue, and if you're a guy, you shouldn't have a say in it. Well, no, hang on. I think that if you're a guy, you should probably have a say in whether somebody else is getting killed, just as much as a woman, because it's an issue of murder. And I also find it hypocritical of people who they don't support the death penalty, but they do support abortion. At least have some like philosophical consistency there, So
right, and the thing is, like, the Supreme Court has legitimately they have said that it's unconstitutional to give a rapist the death penalty. And regardless of whether you support the death penalty or not, like, this should concern you that rapists cannot be given a death penalty, and at the same time, children who are conceived in rape can be.
Yeah.
And so that gives rapists more rights than innocent children.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, that just makes my blood boil. I knew that, but then just hearing it again, it's just like, ugh. It's infuriating to me. But just go ahead.
I was going to say, like, they always frame it, oh, men can't have a say in this debate. But men were the ones who voted to legalize abortion, all right? There are men on the Supreme Court that voted in favor of abortion. The women's empowerment movement, the original authentic women's movement was hijacked by pro-abortion men, Bernard Nathanson, Larry Lader, who Bernard Nathanson actually became pro-life, but they convinced women to take up the abortion issue. But that was men leading the fight to include abortion, and it's really it's absurd to me that they'll be fine with Cory Booker and Bernie Sanders and whoever speaking about encouraging abortion, but then if there's a pro-lifer who wants to speak out, then they'll be against that.
Yeah, I also think that it's kind of the pro-abortion movement kind of eating its own or swallowing its own tail. Like you're not supposed to be pro-men unless those men are for abortion. But then those men are kind of benefiting from it because then they're eliminating the responsibility to themselves for taking part in the act that created the problem or the pregnancy in the first place. Not to call a baby a problem, just to say that they are contributing to the issue at hand, and they don't want any more responsibility with this issue than women seem to. But moving on to the kind of the news of the week, which has made me very excited. It's kind of been a big deal that the Planned Parenthood just fired their president from their organization. But I'm quite disappointed that it seems like the media, even the conservative media, isn't really running with this. It's just kind of been buried in the news that they're firing their president right now, and I think that that's a really good sign that there's been a little bit of a break in their confidence. So, what's your take on this move from Planned Parenthood, and do you feel like it's not being covered at all or enough?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the surrounding issue, it's purely speculation as to why exactly she was fired. Mm-hmm. But there was recently news that came out like about 2 weeks ago that she had just had a miscarriage.
Oh, wow.
And to think, right, and how pro-woman is it for Planned Parenthood to fire a woman while she's grieving from a miscarriage, right? And that's pretty messed up. But I'm really not sure of this move by Planned Parenthood. Leanna Wen tweeted back in January that hers and Planned Parenthood's core mission is to provide, protect, and expand access to abortion. Mm-hmm. But in her statement after she was fired, this part was taken out of her post on Facebook, but she said that in part the new board leadership has determined that the priority of Planned Parenthood moving forward is to double down on abortion. And so I'm thinking not even Leanna Wen was pro-abortion enough for Planned Parenthood. And so now they replaced her with a political activist. Before they had a so-called doctor, mm-hmm. Now they have a political activist at the helm. So I think it's a win for the pro-life movement because it shows that that Planned Parenthood doesn't really care about women's health or caring about any of that. They care about abortion. That's their priority. Mm-hmm. And even Wen wasn't pro-abortion enough.
Yeah, it really is kind of strange because I thought that she was like Cecile Richards, but even worse. She was kind of sold to us as this is the next level. And I wonder now that this is the first time I'm hearing about her having had a miscarriage. I wonder if that affected her ability to function as president, having had that miscarriage. But so one of the complaints they seem to have with her is that donations seem to have been dropping over the last year. And I'm wondering if she's getting the blame for something that isn't necessarily her fault, because also over the last year, there's been like huge strides in the pro-life movement, whether it's been with state laws or things going to the Supreme Court or different justices being appointed to the Supreme Court or whatever it happens to be. It feels like that there's becoming somewhat of a culture shift. So do you feel like that this president might be just getting kind of the blame for what is naturally occurring culture shift instead of just her inability to bring in money for Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I mean, Planned Parenthood knows they are losing. Mm-hmm. You know, more Americans than ever before identify as pro-life. And like a recent Gallup poll came out that there are more Americans who identify as pro-life than pro-choice. And 80% of Americans support significant restrictions on abortion. Not everybody, not even close to a large percentage of people support Planned Parenthood's no restrictions on abortion, legal through all 9 months, and taxpayer funded. It's absolutely absurd, and Planned Parenthood knows it. Planned Parenthood knows that they are on the cusp of losing the culture, and they're just doing what they can to hold on. And I think Americans are truly waking up to the horrors.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that this this is the thing that makes me the most excited about this firing of the president. And I don't know, like, if all of my assumptions are correct. Obviously, we don't all have all of the information, but I just think that, okay, so there's this huge culture shift, and they're not bringing in enough money, and so they're firing their president. I think it just feels like they're putting the blame in a place where it doesn't necessarily belong at this point. But by all accounts, even BuzzFeed is admitting that this president was kind of a monster of a boss. I was reading an article from them talking about how she had everything from like stringent handbooks to speech codes and things you can and can't say in front of her at the office, and distrust of longtime employees. Are you surprised, or do you think anybody would be surprised that they would have this kind of a person in charge of Planned Parenthood? It just doesn't sound like a nice place to work generally.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound like a nice place to work. I think what Planned Parenthood originally, when they hired her, was trying to do was trying to legitimize abortion as healthcare. Mm-hmm. By hiring a doctor, they could then say that abortion is healing, right? Mm-hmm. That killing is somehow healed. And so I think hiring Leona Wen, they were trying to legitimize themselves. They in 2017 they committed over 330,000 abortions. Wow. Their priority is abortion. Yeah. They brought in over $190 million in abortion revenue alone. $190 million. Think about like how many women experiencing unplanned pregnancy that you could help with $190 million. You can buy a lot of diapers. Yeah. You can buy a lot of formula. And it goes to show, like, to be pro-life is to be pro-women. You know, we are the ones who are standing there with women, providing. We have thousands of pregnancy resource centers that provide free and compassionate care to women, providing them with housing, providing them with food, anything they need, so that they can be empowered to choose life.
Yeah, it's just really amazing how they're just the biggest. You know, the left is always talking about how they're anti-corporation and anti-making money, basically. And then you look at Planned Parenthood, which is their champion, and they're raking in so much money. And it's so obvious, but then it's so not obvious because they've done such a great job PR-wise of selling it as, oh no, this is women's health care. No, you're raking in thousands upon thousands of dollars from women who are largely minority, largely poor, and you're just raking in money from poor people, essentially. I mean, they... Go ahead.
If you care about women's health, I'm sorry, if you care about women's health, why don't you own a single mammogram machine? Yeah. That was my question. Why is every health services, why are pap smears decreasing? Why are all these services decreasing while abortion is skyrocketing along with the taxpayer money? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then they really, I mean, it is their biggest moneymaker, and so that's why they're pushing it. And it's just so unfortunate that, and it's just galling, really, that their biggest moneymaker is their death machine. So, I mean, it's just amazing.
So, what would you say? How can people become more involved with the pro-life movement generally?
Yeah, I think it depends on what stage of life you're in and what you're passionate about. You can volunteer at local pregnancy centers. You can share pro-life content on your social media. You can start a local pro-life group either in your school or your community. Live Action even has an ambassadors program that you can join and be a part of. And so there's tons of ways to get involved in the pro-life movement, but really just getting out there, sharing with your friends and family what you believe, the reality of abortion. So, like you said, so many people are their eyes are shielded from the reality because they've been fed all these euphemisms from the abortion industry all these years, and from the media and from celebrities. But really, I would just encourage people to read up on the issue, really be educated, so they can be good advocates in their communities.
All right, awesome. So, thank you so much for coming on, Devin. I did want to ask you one final question. I try to get this question in on most of my episodes, but what would be your maybe top 2 or 3 Twitter sites to follow? They don't even necessarily have to be pro-life sites, but if you had like a couple of Twitter sites that you wanted to recommend that people follow regarding the pro-life movement, or just sites that you like to follow generally.
Sure, yeah, I would definitely recommend following Live Action, following Lila Rose, our president, on all our social media platforms, and even I would look at Live Action News. It's liveaction.org/news, and we report on all of these issues. We report on these pro-life polls that show massive wins on breaking news, and so all 3 of these areas are really good places to get educated and equipped so that you can go out and advocate for both mothers and children.
All right, awesome. Well, Devin, thank you so much for coming on. This is the first. I think you and I have been Twitter friends for a couple of years now, but this is the first time we've been able to talk over the phone. So thank you again for coming on. I really had a good time.
Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, talk to you later.